So, welcome to today's podcast. I am delighted to be joined by special guest Jacob Luna, who is the Director of Client Security Advocacy at ADP. My name is Peter Finter. I'm Chief Marketing Officer for CyberGRX, and Jacob is our Exchange Champion for 2023, one of our Cyber Risk Nation Award winners. To get us into it, let me introduce Jacob to you. He is a trusted cybersecurity and technology leader with a unique and concentrated focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. He served as a change agent and a trusted IT and security advisor for over 2 decades and is currently the Director of Client Security Advocacy at ADP. Additionally, he serves as board chair for the Dallas-Fort Worth chapter of NextGen Cyber Talent, a national nonprofit aimed at educating underprivileged, underserved talent and increasing diversity in cybersecurity. Jacob, it is a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us. And congratulations for being our Cyber Risk Nation Exchange Champion of the Year. We are excited to see you recognized for your contributions to the cybersecurity industry as well as in your own organization. Maybe to get us started, you could tell us just a little bit about your role at ADP and maybe how the focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion fits with your role at ADP.
Yeah, absolutely. And, thanks for that introduction, Peter, and thanks for having me. Before we get underway, I should share that the views expressed on this recording are entirely my own. And to answer your question direct, how did I get into cybersecurity? A little bit about my role in what I do today, as it sounds like, Director of Security Advocacy. What I'll tell others in the organization and outside of the organization is that I'm a storyteller. I'm a glorified.
We have it in common, Jacob. You're one of us.
Yeah. So this one may be a bit longer than your normal recording. We should tell our guests that now. But in any event, yeah, I consider myself somewhat of a journalist, right? I've got to understand very complex situations and complex topics, and then distill them down into digestible format so that we can provide assurance, so that we can provide some level of comfort. And so, I'm thrilled to do that day in, day out. I'm a people protector, and I take that seriously. And then the fun stuff of the job is really in all of my roles that I've been involved in. I try to look for roles where every day things are just a little bit different, and there's a new challenge on the horizon. So that's what keeps me energized and jumping out of the bed daily.
Well, what I know, Jacob, is that you run one of the largest operations I'm aware of responding to requests for cybersecurity information pertaining to risk management. I believe I'm right in saying you have even thousands of such requests arriving for you and your team to take care of every year. A highly responsible position, and a lot rides on it. Of course, all of your clients, your customers, your prospects are depending on the value of the information that you provide. Tell us a little bit about how you got to be in this position, Jacob. What was the journey that you took through the cybersecurity landscape to get you to the place where you are now?
Yeah, so I was actually supposed to be driving the Boeing. I was bags were packed, ready to go. I was on my way to aeronautical school. I'd been accepted into a commercial pilot program, and something that I am highly passionate about, and you're going to hear touches on this throughout our conversation, is the importance of mentorship. And I grew up in a small rural town in Texas, and didn't have access to a lot of what we used to call in the industry white collar workers. And there was one individual in my family's network who was in technology, and they started having these conversations with me about what technology and a career in technology could look like. And one day they brought over a magazine, and this is going to date me as well as some of the listeners out there, but they brought over Microsoft's annual salary report, and it was MCP magazine. For those who aren't familiar, it's Microsoft Certified Professional. And this was in the heyday of certifications, right? This is when an MCSE could net you a lease on a BMW 3 Series if you think that that's a reliable machine. But in any event, that's the type of climate that the industry was operating in at the time. And my family wasn't a family of means. We were working class. And this was introduced to me as a avenue that I could pursue in order to support myself as I went on to college and study. And so, once I saw that tangible thing that I could hold of the salary estimates, that was something that I really latched onto. I mean, that was the motivation at the time, how to get myself through college. And thankfully, IT security has been very, very good to me. It's seen me through my AA, my undergrad, my grad, and now my studies at MIT. And it's just been, it's been a wild ride. I continue to find myself in these unique roles where communication is vital when we're talking about the types of things that we're protecting. So in any event, that's a little bit about how I got here, and why I love it.
I love that story, not least because you really weren't born into this environment. It sounds like this was quite a different world from the one that you were growing up in. And yet you mentioned the importance of a mentor or having people looking out for you who were able to create opportunities or encourage you to take steps to creating your own opportunities. And you mentioned earlier that mentoring is something which is extremely important to you. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's manifested in your life, both you as a mentee looking for others to help you, and then how you translated that into the world that you're in today, and where you are helping folks earlier in their careers make good choices and develop themselves to their full potential?
I love to learn. And there is, that's an interesting question. There's a few ways I could take it, but really I love to learn, and there's so much knowledge. There is so much updating that we have to do in our careers in cyber. I remember as I was coming up in this industry, one of my mentors was adamant about, you have to be able to update like yearly, like be ready to learn something tectonically new every year.
Great advice.
And so be prepared for that, right? It isn't it is this industry, and something that I love about it is very accommodating to the growth mindset. It's actually mandatory to the growth mindset. And that's something that is highly embraced in a lot of the educational institutions that are starting to produce the leaders of tomorrow. Is let's make sure we've got that growth mindset. Let's make sure that we are putting people in the middle of the systems that we're building to create and get better at what we're doing and to improve upon these processes. And you're going to have resistance when you do that, so you got to be prepared for that too. So I talk a lot, if you listen to some of the other materials that I put out in the public space, I talk a lot about the importance of building your box. And so what I mean by that, we're on the heels of Wimbledon, so I'll bring in, I grew up playing tennis. And in tennis, you have several different types of coaches. The further you get, you'll have you might have 14 different coaches. And, that's been no different with the way that I've approached this career. I've got a CISO coach. I've got a communications coach. I have a connector coach. And I'm constantly probing, how can I elevate? How can I build and grow my brain-body connection? How can I build and grow my curiosity, my capability to flex my intuition muscle without offending someone? And so really I'm constantly chasing to elevate. And I think that's very important in what we do as cybersecurity professionals, because the threat landscape changes daily, because the risk is changing, because technology is compounding upon itself, because the adversary has the assets that they need to do more with less. And so all that really just to say it's never stopped. I'm very aware of things that I want to grow into myself and how I can better protect the people I care about. Now, looking the other direction, looking back, I am constantly trying to empathize with those that I'm either mentoring, or those that have sought me out for any, even if it's just a quick question. Where is this question coming from? Like, what has, first of all, kudos to them for asking the question in general.
Right.
There are so many barriers to professionals withholding questions. And if we had an hour, I would love to dive into that. But in any event, the what it takes for someone to approach someone else with a question is, there's something to be said for that. And in this industry specifically, something that I appreciate tremendously is anytime that I've gone to someone with a question, it doesn't matter if they have a C in front of their name or if they don't. They're responding to me and they're helping me. And so I take that and I turn it around. And anytime someone is asking me things, out of band, in band, it's my duty to help them. And so I feel that like this very much is a community of professionals where we're not throwing mud at one another. We're not trying to one up one another. We're all just trying to do right by the people we're protecting.
Yeah, that's a wonderful attitude. And, to your point, the job is really bigger than any one of us can do on our own. We are only successful insofar as we operate as a community. And I think third-party risk management is a classic case where it is, frankly, too big for any one organization, let alone any one individual, to be able to get their arms around it. But by working in concert together, it makes an enormous difference. I'm wondering if you might recommend any particular resources for folks that are thinking about doing what you're describing and maybe even following along in your footsteps, things that would help them to continue to build their curiosity, develop their intuition. What kinds of resources do you like to recommend to the folks in your own team or in your wider network, Jacob?
Yeah, oh my goodness. That is a loaded question. And really, I would hit that ball back to you to really determine the individual that's interested in their approach. Everyone's unique and everyone's going to have different requirements and different circumstances. There's a load of free resources available. Obvious plug for our nonprofit NextGen Cyber Talent, where we're helping the traditionally underrepresented and underserved to navigate a career in cybersecurity. And what we do there is we connect them with organizations that offer certification training, that offer communications training, that offer leader training, that connect you with a mentor. These are things that don't happen organically in other socioeconomic areas. These are things that must be introduced into other socioeconomic circumstances. I mentioned at the outset, we had one individual in our entire network growing up that knew anything about IT and security. So now I think of that kid and I think it's my duty to go into these other areas and at least bring awareness to the fact that this is a career path, that this is something that they could do. Now, on the other side of that spectrum, something that I'd encourage any leader, and here's another plug, but MIT Executive Education has been pivotal in the way that I approach, leadership, in the way that I approach leadership at home and at work. There are a lot of things that I have uncovered about myself on a personal level throughout some of these courses, one of which we talked about the importance of questions earlier and having that curious mindset in cyber. And one of which at MIT, I was able to understand truly what was blocking me from asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Something as simple as that.
Yeah.
Now that's on a completely other end of the spectrum. And then there's middle ground resources, certainly, that I can point folks to. But any type of formal communications training where you're really empathizing with your audience, to help them understand, or excuse me, to better help you understand their position so that you can better communicate with them. I think that has made all the difference in my career, leading up to now. So, but yeah, those are some.
Thank you for sharing that. I
Yeah,
appreciate
those are some resources. But if you want to zero in a little bit more on third party, I'm happy to dive into that pool also.
Well, what's fascinating is, Jacob, with all of the potential avenues where you could have devoted your time and attention, you are right now in a third-party risk management focused area of cybersecurity, perhaps one of the emerging areas, one could argue. In recent years, it has come to the fore as a critical vulnerability or potential vulnerability for organizations. They have spent so much time focusing on protecting them own environment and ensuring their own employees are doing everything necessary. And yet they are finding themselves working with thousands of third parties, ADP being a great example, working with many different companies, where they've had to pay attention to this new area. I'm wondering, what is it that's top of mind for you as you're thinking about kind of what are the big challenges and the issues that you're seeking to tackle? And how you think those are going to evolve over the next few years. What's top of mind for you at the moment, Jacob?
Yeah, when I think of third-party risk, and when I think of supply chain risk, and some of the many challenges that we've faced in the industry over the past several years, and I talk to other professionals, the thing that continuously pops up is simply being able to inventory, simply being able to understand who it is that you are directly doing business with and that you're indirectly doing business with. So, third party, fourth party, fifth party risk comes into play. That's one of the things that I see the industry struggling with. Something else that I've noticed in the industry, that I think this is the magic, what keeps you up at night question. And something I'll share with you, very personally, things that have kept me up specifically at night is misinformation. And the existential crisis of misinformation, right? We can apply that to absolutely any topic and talk on this podcast for another 75 minutes, but I promise I won't do that to you. But the crisis I see in third-party risk with misinformation is the outsider's perspective of organizational security posture. And what you'll find that's happening is uncredentialed assessments. And then once those uncredentialed assessments are produced, you have organizations that may not be able to, for any myriad of resources, anything like that, may not have a mature third-party risk organization or a mature supply chain risk organization. And so they're becoming more and more dependent on some of these other groups that are building uncredentialed assessments of organizations. And that becomes problematic because it's not the full story. And that is one of the reasons why I am, and I'll use the word, I am just such a believer in what CyberGRX brings to TPRM and risk management in general in the industry, which is the credentialed assessment, right? The invitation into an organization to assess, for all intent and purpose, an auditor's view of an organization. And once that report is created, go beyond that and have Deloitte and Touche, excuse me, come in and certify that report. So what CyberGRX is bringing is factual information to third-party risk industry, and that is something that is, people make livelihood decisions on third-party risk.
Yes.
And it's not something that I take lightly. And so, as you probably pick up in the conversation, and so I think it's so vital to have the right information at the right time, but the accurate information. And so, in any event, those are a couple of things that I see as trends, as things that are really starting to become a little bit more prominent in the space. And then I'm sure you've got something in here about generative AI we're going to have to go into.
I wish we had time to go deep into that. We could spend a lot more time on it. But Jacob, thank you for sharing those thoughts. And one of the things that really strikes me is the value and importance of trust and trusted relationships in the context of risk management. Ultimately, are we able to trust the data on which we make those critical business decisions? And how do we engage effectively with our business partners so that we are operating in a collaborative way to solve this critical problem that affects all of us? Misinformation, to your point, undermines trust and undermines the community on which we depend to do business today. And, with a very large and sophisticated ecosystem of partners, customers, and suppliers that most organizations are now dealing with, trust is really at the core of that. And I think at CyberGRX, we have sought always to create the connection for third parties and customers. That's why we have an exchange model the way that we do, in order that we can establish the facts and use that data to make informed business decisions. And if I may say, Jacob, you epitomize the type of professional that's really making the most of the opportunity to work with a company like CyberGRX to solve these problems. You're a leader in your space. You're committed to the development of others and to create opportunities for those who want to enter the cybersecurity world. And we appreciate for that. We wanted to recognize you for that. And we're proud to call you our exchange champion for 2023. Jacob, thank you so much for sharing your insights today and sharing a little bit of your journey. And we wish you all the very best as you continue to expand your curiosity, intuition, and apply it to ever more challenging areas in our world. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, our audience, for joining us today. It's been great to have you with us. We look forward to having you join a future podcast. But for today, have a great rest of your day. Thank you.